شيل عالجمالي شيل يا حوط بالله دم الشهيد معطر بالليل يا ليلو ويل ويل عالظالمي ويلو ويلو من الله لا اصبر على نجوم الليل انا داويلو شيل شيل عالجمالي شيل يا حوط بالله شيل شيل.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement. The campuses of the San Francisco State University on the San Francisco Peninsula and North Bay are located on the occupied territories of the Ramaytush Ohlone and the coastal Miwok, who, along with the Southern Pomo, are organized as the Federated Indians of Gran Ranchia.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to 2 years on Gaza genocide and the unyielding struggle for Palestinian liberation. My name is Bikram Gill. I'm a member of the Anti-Imperialist Scholars Collective and a member of Virginia Tech for Palestine, VT for Palestine. Again, thank you for joining us today. We're going to have a few speakers who are going to engage in some discussion momentarily, and we will introduce them. I'm just going to begin with a brief framing of the event, and then we'll get into introducing the speakers and some framing questions for them to open up with. So as the title of the event today suggests, we have in there 2 years on Gaza genocide and the unyielding struggle for Palestinian liberation. That means we have to continue to hold two realities with us as we reflect on 2 years and how the struggle will continue, the struggle for liberation and the reality of the genocide. So simultaneously understanding that there's a genocidal war being waged, but that the Palestinian people continue to wage a war for liberation. So, it is 2 years on from Al-Aqsa flood. What was Al-Aqsa flood? This is when the Palestinians' resistance, organized resistance, struck back in an act of self-defense against Zionist colonial occupation when they broke out of the besieged concentration camp of Gaza and renewed the Palestinian struggle for liberation. A heroic, steadfast people who have been dispossessed violently from their homes since 1948 so that Zionists could create a genocidal state on their lands. But nonetheless, the Palestinians refuse to leave. They remain in Gaza. They resist with a commitment that they will one day return and reclaim that which was stolen from Gaza, from them. Gaza remains as ever the cradle of Palestinian resistance, keeping alive the struggle for liberation generation after generation. But today also marks 2 years on, not just from this act of resistance, this act of liberation. It's also 2 years since the Zionist entity escalated its genocidal war against the besieged Palestinians of Gaza. A genocide that has killed and maimed hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, targeted children, journalists, medical workers, educational workers, universities, hospitals, with a scale and intensity the world has rarely, if ever, seen. Dropping American-made, German-made, Canadian-made weapons on displaced Palestinians sheltering in tents, openly starving in front of the whole world, starving to death Palestinians in the face of indifferent and hostile world powers. 2 years on, and the world is forever changed, and we are forever changed. Al-Aqsa flood has changed the world. There is no going back, and has reached down to each and every one of us to reveal the truth of the world in which we live, to reveal the truth of who we are, what we stand for, and what sort of world we choose to live in, what we accept, and what we refuse to accept. We follow the example of the Palestinian resistance that continues to struggle in Gaza, of the Palestinian people who refuse to abandon Gaza City, who refuse to surrender, and they refuse a world built on starvation and mass slaughter. We join them in fighting for a world of justice and liberation for all peoples, a world that will have a rebuilt and liberated Gaza as its beating heart. And yet, 2 years on, even as the resistance continues, even as the mass movement in defense of Palestine, as we see in the flotilla with ship after ship returning to break the siege, with each intercepted ship being responded to with another ship, as we see the people hit the streets in Europe, as the movement continues and persists and grows, those who hold power in our societies continue to stand for a world built on genocide, slaughter, and starvation. They continue to remain invested in the Zionist death machine. They have repressed and hounded those who dare march in the streets for an end to genocide, those who call for disarming the genocidal Zionist entity. This is where they point their power to repress. They continue to be invested in the defeat of the Palestinian people, but they have been forced to act increasingly by the resistance, by the global movement in solidarity. And so today we discuss how to continue to turn the upside down world that those who hold power in our societies create. We turn that right side up by continuing to struggle against the forces of genocide. They are today trying to counteract the growing movement and resistance by recognizing a Palestinian state, but on the condition that it disarm Palestinians and remove the basis of sovereignty for Palestinians. We see peace plans being floated that call for the surrender of the Palestinian people, but nonetheless, even in the face of these diplomatic maneuvers, these fraudulent diplomatic maneuvers, we continue to see the Palestinians and those in solidarity come into even the space of negotiation in a framework of resistance. And what stands before us today then is how do we continue to resist, push for liberation? And what matters is how do you change the balance of forces? How do you change the equation of costs? Whether it's through various forms of resistance, legal means, solidarity, etc., decriminalizing the Palestinian resistance, refusing to let the forces of Zionists and genocide determine how we can and cannot speak. Yeah, that's kind of some of the where we are, how we are entering into, hopefully soon coming into an end to the genocide and continuing the road of liberation. But that's maybe some framing thoughts to start us off with. And I will turn it over to my comrade, Dr. Karina Mullen, who is also a comrade of mine from the Anti-Imperialist Collective.
Thank you so much for those powerful words, Bikram. As Bikram mentioned, my name is Karina Mullen. I'm with also the Anti-Imperialist Scholars Collective, as well as CUNY for Palestine, which is one of the organizers of today's webinar. Okay, so today's panel, 2 years on Gaza, genocide, and the unyielding struggle for Palestinian liberation, brings together a remarkable group of scholar organizers and movement leaders whose work embodies anti-imperialist internationalism, anti-colonialism, and solidarity across our struggles. Each of our speakers approaches the Palestinian liberation struggle from a distinct but interconnected vantage point: law, labor, academia, global solidarity, and movement building, together illuminating the many fronts on which resistance is waged. This panel, I should say, wouldn't be possible with all the behind-the-scenes work of our amazing team of comrades from CUNY and SFSU, including Shabani, Britt, Sadia, Laith, and Lean. And I just want to do a shout out and huge thanks to everyone who helped make this possible. We are honored to be joined today by this amazing group of panelists, including Mariela Castro Espin, whose leadership in Cuba's revolutionary and feminist movements underscores the enduring importance of international solidarity and anti-imperialist coordination among global South states and peoples. Raji Sourani, a lifelong human rights lawyer in Gaza and founder of the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, brings a critical legal and moral voice on accountability and liberation under settler colonialism, speaking from the very heart of the ongoing genocide. Chris Smalls, who will be joining us shortly. He's currently on the streets in Italy protesting against the brutal interception of yet another of the Gaza solidarity flotillas, and they're demanding for all the detainees to be released. So he's out there on the streets fighting the good fight and will be joining us shortly. Chris Smalls is a founder of the Amazon Labor Union and the Congress of Essential Workers, and he represents the resurgence of militant labor organizing in the imperial core and the growing links between worker struggles and anti-colonial resistance from Staten Island to Gaza. And then we have Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi, a pioneering scholar and organizer, who reminds us always that the Palestinian struggle is inseparable from broader fights against racial capitalism, patriarchy, and empire, and that solidarity must always be grounded in an indivisible vision of liberation. And I just want to say I will read more full bios when we come to each of the speakers. So in terms of the framing questions that we've come up with, and then we'll have a set of specific questions for each speaker before opening up to questions from the audience. A couple of the framing questions we have along the lines of of Bikram's introduction. The first one is, 2 years into the ongoing genocide in Gaza, what does this moment tell us about the historical context and reveal about the nature of Zionist settler colonialism and the global capitalist imperialist structure and systems that sustain it? 2, how can we understand genocide not only as a horrific humanitarian catastrophe, but also as a political project that is rooted in empire, capitalist accumulation, and colonial domination? 3rd, in what ways did October 7th open up the space to challenge dominant narratives, at least here in the belly of the beast, that frame Palestinians at best solely as victims, and instead foreground Palestinians as agents of their own liberation? And how has this shift in consciousness within movement spaces reshaped global solidarity? So as I said, I will now go in, I will introduce our first speaker, who will then speak for 7 to 8 minutes, and then I will do the same for the rest of the 3 speakers. And our first speaker is Mariela Castro Espin, who is the director of Cuba's National Center for Sexual Education and a full professor and senior researcher at the University of Medical Sciences of Havana. A feminist, educator, and activist, she has served as a deputy in Cuba's National Assembly since 2012 and was part of the commission that drafted the country's progressive family code. Her pioneering work has advanced sexual rights, gender equality, and the social inclusion of transgender people in Cuba and internationally. The author of more than 20 books, she also serves on several scientific and cultural commissions and is a founding member of the Feminist International and the Progressive International. Since October 2023, she has been at the forefront of international solidarity with the Palestinian national liberation struggle. She is also the daughter, for those of you who don't know, of Communist Party First Secretary Raúl Castro and feminist and revolutionary Vilma Espin, and the niece of former First Secretary Comandante Fidel Castro. Welcome, and thank you so much for being with us today, Mariela.
Muchas gracias por invitarme a participar en este importante encuentro en favor de la causa palestina. Yo pienso que después de 2 años de la heroica operación de Al-Aqsa, el mundo comenzó a tener más conciencia sobre la historia y la realidad del pueblo palestino. El mundo comenzó a tener más conciencia sobre las trampas del imperialismo, sobre las narrativas manipuladoras del sionismo, y empezamos el mundo más ampliamente a a estudiar, a informarnos y a
We started to
dialogar.
investigate and inform ourselves and dialogue.
La solidaridad se ha
Solidarity
fortalecido
has become strong
gracias a la resistencia del pueblo palestino.
thanks to the resistance of the Palestinian people.
Y la indignación ha crecido.
And the outrage has
Y el
grown.
deseo de buscar mecanismos
And a
efectivos
desire to find effective mechanism
para detener el genocidio y
stop
la
genocide.
limpieza étnica.
and ethnic cleanse.
Hemos comprendido también
We have understood as well
cómo el imperialismo, utilizando la ideología sionista,
how imperialism using Zionist ideology
ha confundido a mucha gente en
has
el mundo.
confused a lot of people in the world,
Han victimizado el holocausto
victimized the Holocaust
en la de alemán contra las poblaciones judías, no el
against
pueblo
Jewish
judío.
population, not the Jewish people.
Y bueno, desde ahí se desencadenó lo que ahora estamos conociendo a
that
profundidad
place
para poder desarticular
was unleashed what we're now knowing deeply to be able to disarticulate
todas las mentiras.
all the lies.
Y otra cosa que también se ha podido comprender, que donde entran países
Another
imperialistas
thing we've been able to understand is whatever imperialist countries enter
con la intención de
with the intention
ayudar
of
a la
help,
paz,
peace,
es todo lo contrario.
it's exclusively the opposite.
Hoy se cumple un aniversario del asesinato del guerrillero heroico Ernesto Che Guevara en Bolivia.
Today is the anniversary of the assassination of the Bolivian leader Ernesto Che Guevara.
Y él siempre decía
And
que
he
en el
always said
imperialismo
that in
no
imperialism
se podía confiar ni un tantico así, ni un
You
poquito.
couldn't trust not even a bit like this.
Todos los intentos de negociación por
All the
la
attempts
paz
to negotiate
y
peace
la detención del genocidio
and the stop of genocide
del pueblo
of
palestino
the Palestinian people
han sido mentiras.
have been lies.
Donde Estados Unidos ha entrado a negociar ha
Where the
sido
United States
a
have
favor
entered to
de la
negotiate
entidad
has been in
sionista,
favor of the Zionist entity.
porque la entidad sionista representa los
Because the
intereses
Zionist entities represent the interests
del mega empresariado imperialista
of the mega business world imperialist
y los intereses de los Estados Unidos.
and the interests of the United States.
Podemos decir, Estados Unidos
We
e
can
Israel
say
son lo
the United
mismo.
States and Israel are the same.
Por eso yo creo que debemos
That is why I think
apoyar todas las diferentes iniciativas solidarias,
that we should support all the different solidarity initiatives,
como por ejemplo las diferentes
example,
flotillas
the different
humanitarias
flotillas, the humanitarian
que
flotillas
llegan con ayuda
who have
humanitaria
arrived with
a romper el
humanitarian aid
bloqueo
to break the siege
sionista en
Zionist
territorio palestino,
in Palestinian territory,
seguir apoyando el movimiento BDS,
keep supporting the BDS movement,
seguir apoyando y divulgando las movilizaciones masivas de todos los pueblos que se están pronunciando cada vez con más fuerza contra el genocidio.
keep supporting and visibilizing all the protests and all the demonstrations of solidarity of the people and countries that have kept showing
Y que enfrentan
and who have faced
fuertes represiones por parte de sus gobiernos.
repressions from their governments.
Muchas organizaciones y activistas están siendo penalizados,
Many organizations and activists have been penalized,
acusados de terroristas, como también
Accused of
acusan a
terrorists.
las flotillas.
as also the flotillas are.
Sin embargo, sabemos muy bien
Nevertheless,
y tenemos que hacer
We know
entender
really well
que
we can
tanto la entidad sionista como el régimen sionista de los Estados Unidos son entidades terroristas.
and we need to make everyone understand and comprehend that both the Zionist entity and the Zionists of US are the same. Son lo mismo. Son lo mismo los Estados Unidos y
Israel.
and
Son-
are terrorists.
Son regímenes sionistas, tanto Estados
Are
Unidos como
Zionist
Israel.
regimes, both United States and Israel, and are terrorists.
Y sobre todo me parece importante
Especially, I think
apoyar
it's important
la
to support
declaración de la Red de Organizaciones No Gubernamentales Palestinas, PNGO,
I think it's important to support the organization, the non-government organizations who support
que
Palestine,
ha sido
NGO,
respaldada por el presidente de la
Has
República de
been-
Colombia, Gustavo Petro,
that has been supported, publicly supported by the President of Colombian
para
Republic, Gustavo Petro,
la resolución
represent
377A,
the resolution 37AA,
unidos por la paz,
United for Peace,
ante la Asamblea de las Naciones
before the
Unidas,
United Nations General Assembly,
con la intención
with the intention
de crear una fuerza protectora
of create a protective force,
de una coalición de
a
países
coalition of countries,
en la que no participen los países
in where
cómplices,
complicit countries do not participate,
de manera tal que se pueda evitar que se convierta en una fuerza de ocupación como ha ocurrido en otros países, y que estos son justamente los planes de Trump, de Francia y de Arabia Saudita.
in a way that we can prevent that they all become a force of conquer and domination, as it has for United States, Arabia Saudita, and France.
Esta figura
This figure,
de Unidos por la Paz,
United for Peace,
tiene carácter vinculante de obligatorio cumplimiento por los Estados miembros,
has vinculant character,
y evitaría el veto de
And would
Israel y
avoid the
Estados
veto.
Unidos en el Consejo de Seguridad.
the Israel and United States veto.
Creo
And
que es
the
una buena
Security Council.
iniciativa que debemos apoyar junto con todas las que se están desarrollando, porque
It
todas
is a
son
good initiative that we should
valiosas
support.
y todas han demostrado que el mundo ya no tiene miedo del imperialismo,
And all have showed that the world is no longer afraid of imperialism,
a pesar de sus crueldades y a pesar de su arbitrariedad.
despite their cruelties and arbitrarian forces.
La historia ha demostrado que el colonialismo no cede con negociaciones.
History has proven that colonialism won't cede, won't complain with
El
negotiations.
colonialismo, el imperialismo, el
Colonialism,
sionismo,
imperialism, Zionism,
el fascismo
fascism
se enfrenta y se derrota.
are need to be
No
faced
se puede negociar.
and cannot be negotiated with.
Y por tanto hay que seguir defendiendo la idea de que no se trata de una guerra, sino de la resistencia de un pueblo frente a la colonización.
That is why we need to keep and change the narrative that it's not about a war, but the resistance of our country, of a people against imperialism.
Y que la causa palestina es la causa de la humanidad.
And the Palestinian cause is a humanity cause.
Si Palestina no resiste,
If Palestine won't resist,
caerá el mundo, caerán las posibilidades de paz.
the world will fall, and along with it, the possibilities for peace.
Cuando el imperialismo logró
When the imperialism succeed,
desmembrar Yugoslavia y el campo socialista,
break Yugoslavia and the socialist
y el
wall,
campo socialista, y cuando cayó el
Build
campo
the
socialista,
wall.
pues bien, se le abrieron todas las puertas para el gobierno
all the doors were
unipolar,
open for the unipolar government.
que cada vez es más peligroso y
That
más amenazador
Becomes more and more
de la paz
dangerous
mundial.
every time, and it's more threatening for the world peace.
Thank you very much. Shukran.
Thank you so much, Mariela, for those really powerful words, and for reminding us that the Palestinian cause is humanity's cause, and that we can't negotiate with fascism and imperialism, and that this new world is emerging that is not afraid to take on these forces of fascism and imperialism, and this death cult really that's behind the genocide. And also thank you for reminding us of that today we commemorate the anniversary of the revolutionary Che Guevara's assassination at the hands of those very imperialist fascist forces in Bolivia. I appreciate you reminding us of that. And I want to thank as well, while we have the chance, the wonderful translators with Mariela, Maiti Navarro and Camila Duran. Also want to thank you for raising the importance of the Uniting for Peace resolution. And we will come back to that. And I actually have a question for the speakers about this resolution that was recently brought to the UN General Assembly by Colombian President Gustavo Petro, a very important initiative. So thank you for that. Our next speaker is Raji Sourani. Raji Sourani is a prominent Palestinian human rights lawyer and the founder and director of the Palestinian Center for Human Rights in Gaza. A former Amnesty International prisoner of conscience, he has spent decades defending Palestinians against human rights violations, both by the Zionist entity as well as the Palestinian Authority. Sourani is a recipient of the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Award and the Right Livelihood Award in 2013 for his steadfast commitment to justice under colonialism. Despite imprisonment, exile, and the destruction of his organization's Gaza office in 2025, he continues to advocate fearlessly and internationally for accountability, international law, and the protection of civilians in Gaza. Please, Raji, the floor is yours. Thank you. Oh, okay. I see Raji is still trying to connect. Please bear with us while we are dealing with some technical difficulties. Okay. I believe Chris still hasn't joined the call yet, and Raji is having some trouble getting into the room. So I think we will move on to Dr. Rabab Abdelhadi. Dr. Rabab Abdelhadi is the founding director and senior scholar of the Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diasporas Studies program at San Francisco State University and principal investigator of Teaching Palestine, Pedagogical Praxis, and the Indivisibility of Justice. A scholar, activist, and internationally recognized educator, she has taught and built programs at institutions including Yale University, Hunter College, CUNY, and the American University in Cairo, and Birzeit University in Palestine. Dr. Abdelhadi has published widely on feminism, nationalism, and Palestinian liberation, and has received numerous awards for her scholarship, teaching, and community leadership. As a co-founder of the U.S. campaign for the academic and cultural boycott of Israel and California Scholars for Academic Freedom, she continues to bridge scholarship and organizing in the struggle for justice and liberation. Thank you, Dr. Abdelhadi. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much for everybody who came together to actually organize this. And thank you so much, Compañera Mariela. And thank you for the Cuban amazing people and revolution who have historically stood and continue to stand by the Palestinian people. And I also want to give a huge shout out for the efforts of everybody, from the Palestinians who are standing steadfast, that steadfastness allows the movement for the liberation of Palestine and the movement for the liberation of the world and the solidarity movement that has stood and is not being defeated today. And then, of course, thank you for my comrades and colleagues who worked with us together to bring this incredible open classroom together, and maybe we can talk about it a little bit later. I was hoping that I will be speaking after the amazing lawyer Raji Sourani. He who is also part of the ICJ, but these technical difficulties are really problematic. So I will address briefly the three questions that you raised to us, and I hope that I'll be able to address them and connect them to the discussion we're having. So in a few points I wanted to raise. One, I think it's really important to emphasize again and again that October 7th, which was yesterday, did not happen all of a sudden, was not the beginning of history. The US, Israeli, and other colonial and settler colonial powers always try to determine the points of history in a way that suits their purposes in order for them to divorce themselves from the responsibility and accountability for the vicious crimes, starting with the beginning of genocide, in order for them to succeed in their settler colonial project of displacing and removing and erasing the indigenous people of the land and any other communities of color and people that have been repressed and oppressed by their practices and by their actions, which are also strategic and not spontaneous. As the history of Gaza and the history of Palestine and the history of the US as a settler colonial regime show, this has been all the colonial powers has been documented. So it is something that we can go over and discuss in details when we have, if we have more time to talk about that. But this also shows that from its inception, the Zionist settler colonial project in Palestine has been going on for over 100 years. And historically, the goals of the project has been the erasure of the Palestinian people in order to remove the Palestinian people from the land and present the Israeli regime as the legitimate regime that presents in these lands. And there have been many ways to erase the Palestinian presence, the Palestinian relationship with the land, the image and the way the land is presents, the ecological system, destroy the culture, or abuse it and appropriate it and present it as if it's Israeli culture, destroy the standing buildings and villages. About at least 500 people say 531, some people say 532. The numbers fluctuate, but at least we know of over 530 villages. We do know that many trees, indigenous trees, have been pulled and replaced by foreign trees, which explains why there are so many fires that continue happening again and again. Of course, the Israeli government continue to blame Palestinians, whose land it is, and who are pained whenever a little tree is destroyed. And Israel continues to destroy trees. The music, the language, everything has been attempted to be destroyed in order to construct and invent a settler colonial presence in its everything. And then we've seen that also with the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We've seen that in South Africa. We've seen that in Algeria. We've seen that in many other places of the world. And now there are projects all over that defy, challenge, and intend to reinstitute and reconstruct the history. But with the Israeli project in Gaza, the Israeli genocide in Gaza has genocided the people themselves and has also destroyed the presence of even landmarks that have existed for 1,000 years and so on, to destroy that. In addition to that, genocide includes also the destruction of future generations of Palestinians, the children, the destruction of possibilities of having future generations, reproductive genocide. There are so many evidence that we can talk about. I don't want to go into them because we don't have enough time, but this is the way settler colonialism works. And Zionist settler colonialism that emphasizes the whole question of displacement, uprootedness of Palestinians continuously, again and again, and massacres and killing Palestinians is a very important part, a center point of it. Materially destroy the Palestinian people, and it's also very much connected. It's material project that's connected with racial capitalism, with the global capitalist imperialist structure, from the collaboration between Herzl and Rhodes, the Weizmann, the collaboration with all the colonialist power and the capitalist construction. Today we see it also in the corporatization of the universe and the collaboration between the Zionist big business and big tech and so on, and with the universities, with the institution of the state. It's happening everywhere, and this is also present in the resistance. So the resistance to settler colonialism and the resistance to fascism, colonialism, repression, genocide is also affecting and targeting the capitalist greed is involved in also projecting different way of life for everybody around the world, for Palestine as a signifier of justice, and also for all the resistance movement that are working specifically to create a different world. And so when we're talking about all these structures, including Mariela mentioned the assassination of Che Guevara, who actually was in Gaza, visited Gaza, and went there and spoke also, has been speaking about as part of the Cuban Revolution. I mean, there are the principles of the Cuban Revolution that are still carrying on today. When he spoke in Gaza, when he spoke at the United Nations as Che Guevara, and when Comandante Fidel has historically also emphasized again and again against Zionism way before many of the world leaders have done so. And Fidel, Raúl, and Diaz-Canel continue the legacy, and all the Cuban revolution and all the Cuban people continue to emphasize, talk about this. There is also a very important discussion and comparison, if we want, between the U.S. imperialism, for example, and the Zionist regime and the Zionist tool in the collaboration about weapons, the development of weapons, the targeting, the invasions, whether we talk about the Bay of Pigs in Cuba, whether we're talking about the assassination of Che Guevara. Let's talk about the ways Israel is assassinating Palestinian, Lebanese, targeting everybody who they see, because they also are interested in eliminating the leaders who are developing and leading and have experiences as cadre leading movements. Takes a very long time to build people who have been historically experiencing and know this, and also to attack by weapons. And I've said it so many times that the only thing that Israel has basically superseded all of us again is being a killing machine. That's the best thing that Israel has excelled in, and Netanyahu has just admitted that they have not been able to achieve any of their goals. So they continue setting goals and they continue failing, but the only goal that they are the best at is in being a killing machine. However, Israel has failed, and this is why October 7 becomes a very big issue for them. Israel has failed in standing against a very small, irregular army, guerrilla army, that actually challenged its intelligence, its historical might. It's presenting itself as the strongest and mightiest power of the world that never gets defeated despite the presence of 23 Arab countries and so on and so forth. And this is something that Israel will never ever be able to accept as a colonial power in the face of anti-colonial small people, just like the United States was not able to understand and accept the defeat, its defeat in Vietnam, or the French were able to accept the defeat in Algeria. And the United States has not, until now, has not been willing to accept its defeat in Cuba, and has every single day we see more and more ways to specifically punish, and I want to use this word punish, specifically anti-colonial liberation movement who stand up and challenge it, the same way Israeli leadership, and I'm not talking only about Netanyahu, because the media tends to only focus about one individual, as if Netanyahu is removed from power, those who are opposing him are actually going to provide us with a better and alternative. That will be the solution, which we can also discuss about the whole differences within the Zionist establishment. They might be, some are more, they have more cosmetic changes and some are worse, but at the end of the day, they are committed to the Zionist project of genocide, of domination of the world, of militarization, of privatization, of exploitation, and so on. But to get back to this, as Frantz Fanon argued at many of the people, this is the 100th centennial of Frantz Fanon, of Fidel Castro, of George Habash, of Patrice Lumumba, of Malcolm X, of so many leaders and so many. And I wish we can also speak about all the women and honor them. This is the ways. I'm going to go back to Fanon. This is the way when Fanon discussed the whole question of the zones of being and unbeing. We're talking about how the settlers, how the colonists look at the colonized people. This is why people wonder, why is it that Trump, for example, keeps talking about the Israeli prisoners, the Israeli captives? How come he never speaks about over 10,000 Palestinian prisoners in the West Bank and Jerusalem, over 10,000 in Gaza, and there are so many are unmentioned, unspoken about in the 48 areas, and also within the prisoners, this category that they invented, illegitimate combatants. If you're, I mean, it's an oxymoron itself, but why don't they speak about that? And I would say it's first of all, it's because they are only concerned, and it's an Israeli-centric discourse, so they're only concerned about other colonies, the same way that Trump also said that all the immigrants should not be able to stay and should be deported. However, the South African whites who have historically had privilege and continue to have privilege in South Africa are a protected category and should be given refuge in the United States. This ridiculous argument also applies to the Palestinians in a matter that they are seen as less than Israelis, as less than other white groups in terms of white supremacy. So their lives are not seen as equal, but also in the sense that how dare colonized people stand up actually and see themselves as equal, but they're actually not in the battle of comparing themselves and worrying about what the colonists think, and that the colonizers need to prove that they are equal. They're not really even concerned about that. They don't sleep and go to bed and so on. Why do they hate us? They're not worrying about that, but they actually stood up, and that the colonists in that equation, the colonists are never going to accept or let it go that the colonizers stood up and fought. And this is why they have to be punished, while the colonizers stand and keep fighting. And they keep fighting, and that's the price, why the price is so high, why there are at least 3 million Vietnamese who were martyred in this struggle, why there are 1.5 million Algerians, but since 1832, there have been at least 8 million Algerians, and so on. So we don't want any Palestinians to be targeted. We don't want anybody to be targeted. We want a free world. We don't want any weapons. Everybody says that. But there is this cost that they punish the population, they punish the people. They want the population to stop being supportive of liberation, of freedom, of dignity, of self-determination, of return, and of the resistance that are actually fighting for that. So that's a very important things to think about punishing the population, punishing the resistance fighters. And also the other thing that I would say, and I think it's really important, is also even determining which are the borders, and which are the borders, and how do we think about the borders, and taking for granted that the borders that exist are actually colonial borders, are actually taken for granted borders. And in the case of Israel, for example, in the case of the US, Manifest Destiny and so on, what are the borders? And then they said these are the borders, and then they have to be defended. And even in the case of Gaza and in the case of Palestine, the people in Gaza, they want to return to their original homes before 1948, before Nakba, and before the let's say legitimization by the UN and other international bodies of the Israeli settler colonial regime. And I think this is very much rooted and very much part of the colonial empire, legitimized by the nations and the world powers that were part of the United Nations, whether we're talking about the League of Nations, whether we're talking about at 1945 and so on, and continuing recognizing the partition, and then recognizing the state of Israel and so on, and then acting upon these established facts on the ground as if they have existed all the time. And that's the starting point where we start. And so again, treating history as if these points of history have started at that particular, not thinking about and not taking into consideration what has happened before, that actually drove the colonizers to rise up and resist all these, and I wouldn't even call them just abuses, because people think abuses are a small thing. All these attacks and genocide and colonial violence in every single aspect of the world, whether it is against education, whether it is against even the air that you breathe, whether it is being stopped everywhere randomly, all the time and so on, deprived of food, intended starvation, that babies are being killed every single day. So this is, all of these things are very much part of a strategic designed pattern that is not accidental, that is not spontaneous, that of course hatred and racism and all of these discourses that here, that all Palestinian children, yesterday or the day before, an Israeli actress was on television saying, yeah, all the children need to be killed because they will grow to be terrorists, and this is kind of like the outlook to human beings. This is the viewpoint. The viewpoint comes along with being nurtured and learned at an early age. The politics of hate is not just divorced from the material conditions. They go hand in hand with the material condition. And I think very big problem for Israel and the Zionist settler colonial regime and their allies, white supremacists, fascists, and right-wingers, is that there is so much spread support all over the world, and so much repression is getting more support. Look at the global flotilla. The more they repress, the new flotilla is starting already, and people have been so abused and tortured and maltreated in the Israeli prisons, and they even let people go out in the suits the way that they let Palestinian prisoners go out in the gray sweatshirts and so on. And every one of them came out and said, I've been really treated. Yesterday, several women said that they pulled their hijabs. They actually, one woman said that she had a mastectomy because she had breast cancer, and they started making fun of her. They abused them. Greta Thunberg, they actually made her push herself on the Israeli flag. They beat her. All of them, they bad language and so on and so forth. And they all come out and saying, yes, we have been very badly treated. However, we know that this is, compared with Palestinian prisoners, go so much worse than this. And we came to bring food and medicine to the Palestinians, and we're not going to stop. We're going to
Rabab, sorry to interrupt. Chris Smalls.
Here? And actually, I was going to mention that.
He has 5 minutes. I think he's in the calling in from Italy, and I think he has like 5 minutes to join us. Then he has to cut off again. So I think we should just shift to him.
Yeah, and I was going to end on this point to say this is why we can have a proof today of Chris Small, who's actually now in Italy with the strike all over, and in Spain and everywhere else. So we're seeing that in evidence. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Can you guys hear me? I'm just making sure.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, I don't know if you guys can see, there's a little bit of a demonstration in the back. They're starting the march, but I'll catch up to them, guys. We were just over here. We took over the square in Florence, and we're in solidarity with the flotillas that's been intercepted as of last night, and the ones that have been intercepted over the last few days. Just calling for our comrades to be released, and once again to Israel to be held accountable for their war crimes.
Corinna, do you want to ask the question to Chris? Or did you want?
Yeah. Great. Chris, do you have a minute for a question or two?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, great. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us, and especially for being there and having U.S. labor represented in this important protest in Italy. And we're just so inspired by our comrades in Italy and how they've been shutting it down with their general strike and shutting down the supply chains, for the merchants of death as well. So we really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Historically, U.S. labor has played contradictory roles. We know both enabling colonial and settler colonialism and imperialist interventions, including support for Zionism, especially by major trade unions like the AFL-CIO. And I know you have a lot to say about that. But also we know, we've had trade unionists play an important role in advancing anti-imperialist, anti-colonial, anti-apartheid struggles. So what role do you see for workers and unions today in the fight for Palestinian liberation?
Great question. Yeah, I think we already know that we won the public opinion already. Palestinian liberation, Palestinian movement globally has won the public opinion, and that includes the rank and file workers of these unions. Even if their leadership is still failing to pass resolutions, or failing to fully divest, or even further than that, taking action, the members and rank and file and everyday Americans are waking up to the truth. The truth has been live streamed on our social medias for the last 2 years. And the fact that the US is the number one supplier, and not just money, but also weapons, these weapons are touching the hands of unionized workers. So there's more that should be done. As you mentioned, I'm over here in Italy, where they already 10 steps ahead of us by shutting down their entire country in different sectors and continuing to do that. They haven't stopped. This has been going on for about a week now, and they plan to continue doing these actions every night until we see some type of accountability with Israel. And we need to do the same thing in the US, especially because of the US being the number one supplier for weapons and money. Our US labor movement, which is supposed to be the shield for the working class, is failing to meet the moment. And that's unfortunate, because you also mentioned that they did stand on the right side of history when it came to the South African apartheid. And we're asking for them to do the same thing, withhold their labor and stand in solidarity with the working class.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Chris. If you have another moment, if you have another, are you still with us? I'm not sure if you're with us,
Yeah.
but we were going to ask you to tell, because we know, as Rabab was talking about, a lot of the people who have been amazing, courageous people who have been arrested as part of the flotillas,
Yeah.
have been talking about their experience, and also highlighting how it's given them a deeper understanding of what Palestinians who are incarcerated by these colonial prisons have been
Yeah.
through. And I know you yourself especially experienced the horrific racism of this Zionist entity. So can you talk a little bit about your experience on the Handala and what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can confirm for everybody that Israel is a racist apartheid state. Just by everything that was done to me from the beginning to the very end. I was out of the 21 volunteers on the Hundela, I was the only Black American. Um, I was the one that was left in there for 5 days, pretty much the last one to leave, along with my Arab brother Hattem from Tunisia. And from the beginning, was assaulted physically, thrown to the ground, used my chains to choke me. They threw me to the ground several times. They separated me from my crew, said some racist remarks saying they're nothing like me, and they were referring to my skin color. And in prison, they used psychological warfare, weaponizing food, knowing we were on a hunger strike, and wasn't going to eat. Um, Lying to us every day, telling us we were going to go home, knowing that we weren't. Um, Making us get dressed, slamming the door in our face. They raided us with the raid unit. And the last thing they did to me and my Arab brother Hattem, they released us at the border of Jordan. Something they haven't done before, but now this seems to be something they're doing now. The new flotilla mission, the detainees were released to the border of Jordan as well. But they haven't done that in 17 years, from the start of these flotilla missions. So when people ask me how was my experience, everything from the beginning to the very end was racially motivated. And I can confirm for everybody that it is an apartheid state. And we have to not only hold them accountable for their war crimes, but we have to hold our own governments accountable for their complicity and participation as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. And I know we'll have some more questions from the audience as well, if you have a moment to stick around. Bikram?
If I don't have the moment, I probably won't, but I will absolutely you know how to find me. I will follow up, and I would love to answer the questions, whether it's through email or text. Please send them to me, and I will definitely do the best I can to get right back with you guys. And I appreciate everybody for holding this space tonight, and everybody watching and listening. We all have a role to play. Let's keep the focus on the people of Gaza and free Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you, comrade. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you guys.
Chris.
Take care.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, so I guess Raji was not able to connect, huh? Okay, I'm just making sure everybody can hear me okay. So let's move on then to some more specific questions for the our panelists. Maybe to begin with one for Mariela. Mariela, you mentioned it's thank you again for mentioning Che Guevara's that it's the anniversary of Che's martyrdom, actually. And when you mentioned that in some of the comments that were made, it reminded me of Che's famous message to the Tricontinental. And I'm wondering, like, what sort of lessons we can take from Che and the Cuban Revolution more broadly. I will read out the quote from Che. It really resonates with me, and I think Che is speaking about Vietnam here. But I think the way Che is thinking about Vietnam and the role that the anti-imperialist movement across the world has in relation to Vietnam, the responsibility, and I think what Che is really getting at is, what does solidarity mean in this context? What does it mean if we say we're in solidarity with the Vietnamese, or we're in solidarity with the Palestinians in their struggle? So this is Che, a passage from the message to the Tricontinental. Che says, and I quote, "It is not a matter of wishing success to the victim of aggression, but of sharing his fate. One must accompany him to his death or to victory. When we analyze the lonely situation of the Vietnamese people, we are overcome by anguish at this illogical moment of humanity." And of course, again, we can replace the Vietnamese people with the Palestinian people today. And so the question, Mariela, that arises out of kind of thinking about when Che is asking us, what does it mean to be in solidarity? Like, what lessons can we draw from not just Che, but the Cuban Revolution, the history of the Cuban Revolution, how it understands global solidarity? So what lessons can we draw from the Cuban Revolution and the role of global solidarity in sustaining it amid relentless imperialist assault, from the US embargo to overt and covert military interventions? So maybe, Mariela, if you could take that question.
Bueno, pues en nuestra experiencia, pero también en la experiencia de todos los movimientos de liberación nacional,
but also in the experience of all the national liberation
de los
movements,
movimientos revolucionarios en resistencia,
revolutionary movements in resistance,
de los movimientos anticolonización
the anti-colonialist
y
movements,
antiimperialistic
movements.
La única alternativa que tenemos es la de resistir y seguir luchando hasta la victoria.
The only alternative we have is to resist and keep fighting until victory.
No queda otra alternativa.
There is no other choice or alternative.
O te haces cómplice del opresor,
or the oppressor,
o te enfrentas al opresor para derrotarlo.
Or you face the oppressor to defeat him.
Y esa es la impresión que da Gaza, esa es la admiración que sentimos por el pueblo palestino que sigue luchando.
That is the impression that Gaza strikes us with, and the Palestinian people show us that and keep fighting.
Por el liderazgo de sus organizaciones insurgentes.
By the leadership of their insurgent organizations.
Siempre los colonizadores van a demonizar a los pueblos en resistencia. Siempre fue así.
Colonialist conquerors will demonize the resistance.
Y no existe en la historia un poder colonial que haya durado por siempre. Siempre han sido derrotados.
And it doesn't exist in history a colonial power that has lasted forever. They have always been defeated.
Para nosotros la solidaridad es también un sentido de responsabilidad, porque
solidarity is also responsibility, meaning
porque nuestra lucha frente al imperialismo siempre ha recibido una fuerte solidaridad de todos los pueblos en el mundo.
Because our fight against anti-imperialism has always received great samples of solidarity from all over the world.
Y hay quienes se burlan y dicen, pero la solidaridad no da de comer, la solidaridad no elimina el bloqueo.
And there are those who mock us and say, but the solidarity won't feed you, won't eliminate the blockade.
La solidaridad no fortalece la economía.
Solidarity won't strengthen your economy.
Pero la solidaridad fortalece el compromiso y el espíritu de lucha de nuestro pueblo.
But the solidarity strengthens our commitment and the fight spirit of our people.
La solidaridad contribuye a presionar a los gobiernos a fortalecer la opinión pública internacional.
Solidarity forces our governments to pressure other governments and strengthen the international public opinion.
Y contribuye a generar conciencias y compromisos.
And contributes to generate consciousness and commitment.
Y sinceramente, ya desde hace muchos años en la Asamblea General de Naciones Unidas, cada año el mundo vota por la resolución presentada por Cuba a favor de eliminar el bloqueo criminal de los Estados Unidos contra Cuba.
And for several years on in the United Nations General Assembly, most of the vast majority of countries vote against the resolution presented for our country to eliminate the blockade imposed by the United States.
Sin embargo, ese voto generalizado del mundo, bueno, con siempre el voto contrario de Estados Unidos e Israel, no lleva a decisiones vinculantes.
However, that generalized vote from all the countries except the United States and Israel won't lead to demanding and link resolutions to stop the blockade.
Y lo cual nos quiere decir que tenemos que buscar también otros mecanismos que sean decisorios.
Which tells us that we have to find other mechanisms that are decisive and will lead to actual measures taken to eliminate the blockade.
La participación de todos los países en los mecanismos de las Naciones Unidas han sido desacreditados y vilipendiados por el imperialismo.
The participation of other countries in UN spots have been
desacreditados.
Discredited
por el imperialismo,
by the imperialists,
especialmente por los Estados Unidos.
Especially by the United States.
Todas las causas justas que se llevan a la Asamblea General no logran avanzar.
All the fair causes that are led and are brought to General Assembly won't prosper, won't succeed.
Por tanto, desde la experiencia de la Revolución Cubana y del liderazgo de nuestro comandante en jefe Fidel Castro,
so from this, our experience at the Cuban Revolution, our chief commander, Fidel Castro,
la unidad de las fuerzas revolucionarias es indispensable.
The unity of revolutionary forces, it's indispensable.
Las alianzas que se puedan establecer entre los países, entre los movimientos sociales, entre los partidos políticos en postura revolucionaria de compromiso con los pueblos.
The alliances that can be made between countries and political parties and social movements are essential.
Entonces, esas son experiencias que sacamos, pero también somos conscientes de que la Revolución Cubana ha sido una inspiración para muchos movimientos revolucionarios en el mundo.
We are conscious that the Cuban Revolution has taken a popular stance and place in
movimientos revolucionarios.
To inspire other revolutionary movements and national movements.
Y especialmente para el pueblo palestino, para la resistencia palestina. Y eso también nos genera una gran responsabilidad.
Especially for the Palestinian resistance, and that generates us a great responsibility as well, and a great commitment.
No podemos permitir que se sigan demonizando a los grupos de la resistencia.
We can't and won't allow that the resistance groups keep being demonized.
Y tenemos que romper esas narrativas.
And we have to break those narratives.
Y tenemos que unirnos para tener más fuerza en esta lucha.
And we have to unite all together to have more strength in this fight.
En estos momentos se ve miedos.
In this moment you can see fear.
Los gobiernos de muchos países están subordinados y atemorizados por los Estados
All the
Unidos.
governments of many countries have been scared and terrified of the United States.
Y la presión de los pueblos es la que va a lograr que estos gobiernos dejen de subordinarse al poder estadounidense.
And the people's pressure, it's the one that will make possible that these governments and from different parts of the world stop subjugate to United States government.
Y también debemos unir fuerzas para poder, a través de los medios de comunicación y las redes sociales y todas las vías posibles, desarticular las mentiras manipuladoras del imperialismo.
And we also have to come all together to in every social media space or social space in general to disarticulate, to separate, disintegrate the idea that these coloners and settlers keep spreading about the Palestinian fight.
Como mismo en las escuelas, en los medios de comunicación, en todo el mundo,
Same in schools and communication.
se hablaba de la lucha del pueblo vietnamita.
They kept talking about the Vietnamese fight.
Ahora tenemos que hacer lo mismo por el pueblo palestino.
Now we have to do the same for the Palestinian people.
Pero también por otros pueblos,
but also for other people and countries
de esta región del mundo,
of this region of the world,
fuertemente amenazada,
strongly threatened
por el sistema colonial sionista.
By the Zionist settler system.
Cuba, Venezuela y Nicaragua en estos momentos
Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua in this
estamos
moment,
siendo fuertemente agredidos
we are being
por los Estados
strongly
Unidos.
assaulted by the United States.
Pero ellos son conscientes que nuestros pueblos están preparados para resistir.
But they are conscious that are aware that our countries
y
are
para
prepared
enfrentarlos
to face them and resist.
No van a pasar.
They won't pass.
El sionismo, el fascismo, el imperialismo no va a vencer.
Zionism, imperialism,
serán derrotados,
serán derrotados
al costo que sea.
To whatever cost it takes.
Thank you very much. Shukran.
Thank you so much for that, Mariela. Really powerful words, and making those connections between Zionism and imperialism and fascism, and the defiance that we see across the global majority states and peoples and movements and struggles, with Cuba really at the forefront. And I really appreciate your words about the unity of revolutionary forces and how indispensable that is. I'd like to move now to a question that really builds on that and Mariela's analysis as well, and to return briefly to Rabab, and then we will open up to the audience questions. And I'd like to highlight in particular one quote or comment in the chat from Jeanette Graulau, who said, quoted you, Rabab, when you said freedom, dignity, self-determination, right of return. And Jeanette wrote, you said it all beautifully, Dr. Abdel Hadi, these are universal principles of all anti-colonial struggles. So I know, your work, both your scholarship and your organizing work, you always do such an incredible job of making these connections between various struggles against colonialism, imperialism, racist capitalism, heteropatriarchy. So I was wondering if you can talk to us a little bit about how this, the resistance, of course, first and foremost, Palestinian resistance, the broader regional resistance, and then the global solidarity movement, how can we connect this to these other struggles that you've done so much to advance?
Okay, thank you for the. Am I muted or not?
We can hear you. We can hear you, but I think
I think that it's actually happening today, and it's been happening around Palestine for a very long time. I think part of it is that the shadow banning and the misrepresentation of Palestinians, partly because of the way the production of knowledge is taking place, in the sense that the narrative of the colonizers and the narrative of the capitalist knowledge production, those who have more domination, the fact that knowledge is generally dominant when you are producing in English, in French, in maybe in Spanish at certain time. It's that knowledge is much more predominant than the knowledge that's produced in indigenous languages. For example, in a month or so, actually in a month, it will be the 50th anniversary of the resolution, United Nations General Assembly Resolution 3379, that considers Zionism, racism, and a form of racial discrimination. And that resolution was in 1975 on November 10th. And that resolution itself is built upon international consensus from so many places. Starts with the UN Conference for Women that took place in Mexico. Then it talks about the non-aligned movement. It talks about the UNCTAD, which is about social justice. Talks about so many of them. I can look it up now, and it's based on all these. The question against apartheid, like it cites all these discussions and resolutions and so on that have been discussed seriously in so many different places, which is the UN at its best. You know, we know when the UN is at its worst, but this is the UN at its best. And that was the 70s, which was the rise of the quote unquote the decolonization of many colonized countries, the will of the world. There were a lot of course, assassinations and attacks against colonized people, but this was also the let's say the third worldism, the rise of people around the world, and so on. So this resolution, and it talks about all of this. So now we will see how this is, but this has been completely shadow banned, and it has been revoked by Ronald Reagan in 1991 as a result, also as a condition from the Israeli government that if it would not be revoked, they're not going to go to the Madrid peace discussions that really led to nowhere. I mean, if at best led to Oslo, which was a disaster case and a colonial structure. And so part of the shadow banning made it impossible to talk about anything. So we're talking now about the 50th anniversary of Zionism, and people are looking around and saying, who talked about this first? Who talked about this first? And people can only maybe find maybe one scholar, Arab actually, not really Palestinian, but it doesn't matter, who talk about Zionism in 65. As a matter of fact, there have been very rich discussions against Zionism from 1910s, 20s, and so on by many writers, Palestinian writers who were in many different places, writing in newspapers, writing in discussions, writing in labor places, writing even in the Communist Party. That's also why the Communist Party split between the Zionists, who were pushing for saying that we should not discuss nationalism because that is divisive, which is, I would say, part of the struggle within the U.S. Labor movement too. And the Palestinians were saying we really need to get rid of Zionism and talk about liberation. Zionism is against labor, against anything of this sort. But nobody can know about it. So, but now there is like much more communication between different people and so on. So I think that part of the ways in which there is people don't really know about it. So that's one thing that is really important for us to communicate with people and raise these questions and make what I always say the visibility of justice, which is based on Martin Luther King's saying that if an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And of course, he was assassinated, didn't have a chance to develop his ideas further. And for a long period of time, there was this disinformation, again, from Zionist groups, saying that Martin Luther King was so supportive of Zionism. Like some people also said that Frantz Fanon would have been a Zionist and so on. I mean, complete ridiculous misinformation. But this is the stuff that happens when you have power, when you have money, when you have a very strong propaganda machine that you can churn and get it all over the world. And when you have willing media that is capitalist media and dominant and systems, imperialist systems. But the Palestinian movement has historically been very much for a different world. And the Palestinian movement, I'd say, and definitely, as Mariela also said, Palestinian and anti-colonial liberation movements have historically raised the question of justice, of anti-colonialism, decolonization, as very important ways to connect with the rest of the world. That's one thing. So it was always internationalist. It was not really chauvinistic or narrow, number one. Secondly, all these movements, if they were really real and committed to their people, they all struggled with questions of let's say, gender liberation, women's liberation. They've struggled with that, and then they also struggled with the question of sexual liberation. I mean, historically, you will see that where it actually emerged. So let's say for Arab and Muslim, including Palestinian communities, there was not the anti, let's say, the anti-gay national public ways in which it was in Christian European and US countries that was so strong, because there was in the Muslim, let's say, tradition and so on. It is not so pronounced. There is some areas, of course, and the state in certain places, whenever it was felt weak, it needed to pick on something, and it's not just on queer folks, on any folks. They always find anybody who they queer on, and it's I've discussed it in many places and so on. But in any case, so you think about that. But then when the let's say LGBT movement, I wouldn't even go into like say Q plus and intersex and so on. But then they started kind of like making it a very big movement, but also connecting it to Western colonialism. Many of the people in many movements also rejected it. But as Al-Qaws and other queer movements in Palestine and the ones anti-colonial in the Arab world go through the whole history and develop it and so on, they show that this is something, a struggle that movements also took up and discussed. And this is also not different than any other place of the world. The problem with the Zionists, it's really their problem. Okay, it's not. It is. I wouldn't say it's a problem for the Palestinians. It's the Zionist problem that they always try to present Palestine and other liberation movements as exceptional. That they are exceptional in their, now they are talking about American exceptionalism, Zionist exceptional, Israeli exceptionalist, different than any other world place of the earth and better than any other place of the earth. This is part of Jewish supremacy, white supremacy, and so on and so forth. We do not engage in this stuff because we do not think we're better or worse than anyone else. We believe like we are in any other society. We have things that are part of traditions that we would like to strengthen, the collectivity, the communal role in raising children, in doing things together, supporting each other, and so on. And we would like to fight against individual, but we also have things that we need to struggle with that have been strengthened due to very dictatorial regimes, and also because of colonialism. So, for example, British colonialism is the one that set this anti-gay rules and laws in Egypt and in India, and they imposed them. They didn't impose them on Palestine because we never had a Palestinian state to deal with that. But this affected a lot of places in the world. So there is these things that have happened, that the revolutions have historically discussed and dealt with and struggled along, and there is a very rich tradition to talk about everything and debate. And there is, but people don't read Arabic. Secondly, we are constantly fighting with all these Zionists, imperialist, racist, colonial, Islamophobic narratives that we have no time to even like think about and share with our allies, with our comrades, with our friends, to what is going on, what's really rich and wonderful and critical thinking that is going on. And it just every time you try to do something of this sort, and I point to myself and my old colleagues, including all of you, because every single time we want to engage in a project like this, they come at us with another attack. And some of the attacks are also to discredit Palestine, but also a big part of it also to keep us occupied, to keep us very busy. So when October 7th happened, and we want to even have discussions about it, the Zionist movement came out with certain diversionary tactics. First, to say that, to protect Israel, to shield Israel from the genocide that it's conducting, and make it sound like, oh, all countries do that. This is laws of war. This is how war is conducted. I mean, several things to make it until now. Oh, this is because Israeli system of criminal justice, and they put it that way, it's overloaded and it's bureaucratic and so on. This is why they don't have time to take care of cases of Palestinian prisoners. Nowhere, that was in the New York Times, nowhere they ask, why is it that there are so many Palestinian prisoners? Why is it that you have all of these problems and so on? Why is it that you don't actually have transparency and accountability? So they start from that to cover up. But for us, it's really important to think about that and to think that we're not a special. We are a case like everybody else. We are a colonized people. We want freedom. We want justice. We want peace. We want our children not to sleep every single night afraid. The first song that we showed, which was an ode to martyrs, just to the martyr. Okay, and it's people sing it without music, and it's been sang in so many places. But the first one, there's the singers are singing it to children, and the background music is drones dropping on them in Gaza. All of it, none of it is scripted, none of it is produced or directed or anything. It's real life and so on. So this is what's happening, but this is what we would like to do. It's like any other people. We want to have that, and people of the world are hearing and listening to what happened. And once, finally, if people are really understanding what does it mean, what does it mean to think about Palestine as a signifier of justice, and what does it mean to connect all justices, that you cannot have gender and sexual justice without justice in for Palestine. You cannot have justice in for Palestine if you are oppressing any part of the population. All of them are connected. You cannot say we liberate Palestine today, tomorrow we can think about liberation of women. That doesn't really work, and that has never worked. And this has been histories of various other movements. It's not special for us, for Palestinians, but there is no understanding of the history. And also part of the problem is that other, let's say, liberal liberation movements in other places, they talk about one dogma and then they say this applies everywhere in the world. So for example, colonial feminists in the United States, and the United States actually more than Europe, because a lot of European feminists retreated from that position, say that in all war, rape is part of all wars and so on. Not necessarily. You're saying that, and then you stuck to it, and then you say it works to everything. Therefore, there was rape as part of war in October 7th. Not necessarily true, and it actually was proven to be not true. Secondly, you say that everywhere in the world, this is when women went out to work. What women went out to work? This has not been the case for most of the women of the world, especially third world women, and so on. So I think it's really important for us to understand. The last point I will say, it's really important for us to commemorate anniversaries, to think about the legacies, to think about the historical narratives, to think about living archives, the archives that we can transcend from one generation to the other, because our written archives do not exist. Either the colonizers steal them, as Israel has done again and again and again. Even the archives of prisoners who write while they are in prison, incarceration, they steal them, but you cannot save a lot. Or it is the living archives who still have a lot of memories that they can share with people because they don't have the time to sit down and write. And this is something that we can share and compare with our comrades. And when I was in Cuba, and Mariela has really done a lot to help me with kind of meeting other people. There is a lot of experiences and examples. The same happened with Puerto Rico. The same happened with South Africa. In many places, you hear things that we say, "Oh my God!" There is a lot of examples of the disappeared people that you can think about that and compare to the bodies of the martyrs that Israel refuses to release to their families to bury. So they are stuck in what do you call it, number cemeteries and so on. So there are a lot of ways. They're not exactly the same, but there are a lot of ways we can share with each other based on the indivisibility of justice.
Thank you, Rabab. That was very powerful. I think we have time for one more question that we received from the audience, and this will be the last, I think, question because we are essentially at time. So I think in both Rabab and Mariela, these last two responses, this emphasis on the inheritance of the archive, or I think Mariela talking about the importance of unity amongst revolutionary forces and the legacy of the Cuban Revolution. I think those are really important. At Cuba, for example, it's not just a revolution that inspires the struggles today for Palestine. It materially matters that Cuba has not fallen. It opens spaces for other states and movements to be able to stand with the Palestinians, to withstand diplomatic isolation and so forth. So that kind of leads into this question. There's two questions we got that are interrelated that I will pose. And again, these are our final set of questions because we're at time. So as we know, this week, you have the so-called Trump peace plan, which again was presented as a surrender plan essentially, but the Palestinian resistance is engaging this process, actually continuing to try to maintain its principles in terms of ending the genocide and advancing the struggle for liberation. So is there any possibility, what can come out of those talks that are happening right now at Sharm el-Sheikh for the Palestinian people? Now, how do we think that in relation to the Uniting for Peace resolution? So maybe the more important question, so if there are any thoughts on what can come out of the negotiations happening in Egypt, what potential, what dangers exist there, but the Uniting for Peace resolution that has been brought forward by the UN General Assembly by Colombian President Petro, that seems to offer a concrete mechanism to override the US veto and authorize international action to protect Gaza, including things like a multinational protection force, sanctions, and a military embargo on the Zionist entity. We've been seeing growing momentum behind this effort with major endorsements from labor and social movements. So, like Via Campesina, the World March of Women, ALBA movements, and others. How do you see the Uniting for Peace initiative fitting into the broader struggle to end the genocide and hold the Zionist entity accountable through international institutions? And what role can social movements play in pressuring governments to support and implement this resolution in the weeks ahead? So essentially, what is the status of the Uniting for Peace initiative? How does it fit in to ending the genocide? And what role can popular forces and social movements play in pressuring governments to support this resolution? I think, Mariela, if you can take that question on, that would be great. Mariela? Oh, yeah.
La resolución. Bueno, yo por eso hablé sobre la resolución que presentó el presidente Gustavo Petro.
That's why I mentioned the resolution that was presented by Gustavo Petro.
Yo creo que es una excelente iniciativa.
I think it's an excellent initiative
que puede sentar un nuevo precedente.
That can come with a new precedent.
Y que independientemente que se haya usado en otro momento, en otras historias, pero en esto, con una situación como esta, de esta envergadura, yo creo que no se había presentado.
It won't matter if it was presented in any other time of history, in any other period of history. In this moment, in such a big events are currently happening, it wasn't presented yet.
Cuando hay una iniciativa con potencialidades, todos debemos apoyarlas.
When there's an initiative with this potential, we all need to support it.
Los estados y la sociedad civil y los movimientos sociales.
The governments, states, civil society, and all the social movements of all kinds.
Y entonces yo creo que eso también fortalecería a estos mismos movimientos que están luchando desde hace mucho tiempo por la misma causa.
I think that this will also strengthen all these same movements, social movements that have been fighting for all this time for this cause.
A mí me parece muy coherente la postura de Gustavo Petro porque no solamente está llamando a hacer, también él está haciendo. Él rompió relaciones con el Estado de Israel. Él ya no va a mantener relaciones comerciales.
I think that Gustavo Petro's position and stand are brave and very coherent because he already broke relationships with Israel and Israeli government. He will no longer will maintain commercial relationships or financial relationships with the Israeli government.
Porque además, como él mismo ha denunciado, el pueblo colombiano ha sufrido muchísimo la presencia del sionismo y del Mossad en las decisiones más terrible contra el pueblo dentro de Colombia.
As he himself has said several times before, the Colombian people had suffered themselves the interventions and the presence of the Israeli government and the Mossad in all the cruelties that they perform and do in their Colombian territory.
Mucha gente todavía no tiene conciencia del peligro que significa el sionismo en el mundo entero.
Most people have not reached consciousness about the threat that signifies the Zionism in the entire world.
El sionismo, además de que colaboró con el nazismo, es la continuidad del nazismo y el fascismo.
Zionism, even if the continuity of fascism, even after collaborating close to fascism itself.
Y lo peor es que a un nivel global están penetrando en todos los países y en todos los espacios, ya sean científicos, tecnológicos, económicos, financieros, en los bancos.
And the worst thing is that they have been penetrating every aspect of every country's life, whether it's financially, commercially, culturally, language, politically.
El sionismo incluso domina la economía, la finanza y la política de los Estados Unidos.
Zionism even rules and dominates the political and financial and economical presence and posture in the United States.
Pero también, como tiene un fuerte poder económico, tiene una fuerte influencia política en muchos estados europeos, como estamos viendo ahora.
But it also has a very strong and big political presence in many European countries, as we are seeing currently.
Yo creo que no solamente hay que romper relaciones con el Estado sionista, relaciones de todo tipo.
I think that we not only need to break relationships of all kinds with the Zionistic state.
Yo creo que tenemos que revisar al interno de nuestros países cómo están operando las comunidades sionistas financiadas incluso por el Mossad.
I think that we need to find in our own countries how the Zionist communities are working, the ones that are financial by El Mossad.
Y hay que tomar medidas consecuentes con las constituciones y con el espíritu soberano de cada país.
And we have to take consequent measures with the constitutions and the sovereignty of all countries.
Por tanto, cada buena iniciativa tiene que tener el apoyo de todos.
Therefore, all the very good initiatives have to have the support of all countries and all of us.
No sé si respondí.
I don't know if I answered, but
No, that was fantastic. Thank you, Mariela. Rabab, did you want to speak to either of those two questions? Very, very briefly, because I think we're at time. But if you did, you want?
I just wanted to say very quick things about Sharm el-Sheikh. That one thing that people don't the Palestinian leadership are actually in engaging with each other, so every decisions are taken together. Secondly, I was definitely nobody trusts Trump or the Israelis because they always lie and they always use it for other reasons and so on. But it's very clear that the Palestinian resistance leadership are very much worrying, as they should, about the fate of the Palestinians, and they are insisting on that. That's really important. Just you asked me to close, I can close that. I think this is coming together. First of all, it's really coming together is very important for all of us, and as scholars, as union members, as activists, as internationalists, we always come and learn with each other, learn with our students, and I will let you know how my students felt after this coming week. And I'm really very appreciative of Raji, and really miss him not being here. My compañera Mariela and Maiti and Carolina to be here with us. This is really incredible. To you, Bikram and Corina, and for Laith and Lean and Brett and Saadia and Shibani for just being just a great, wonderful team. Thank you so much. And I think just learning and being here with each other is just really amazing. And for Chris to be from the US, to be there in Handala and in Israeli prisons, and well, you're one of us, right? You tasted the prison experience. And to be there with the Italian hunger strikers. This is really amazing. I think the strike is so important because it's also showing that you can defeat fascism and you can turn things around. I mean, all of us are kind of like, we learn, we engage in revolutionary optimism, and we continue. And this is really amazing. And this is a great lesson from history, lesson from what's going today. So anyone who wants to engage in defeatism, they can go. It's their choice. They can do whatever they want. But I think, like for me, and I guess maybe for the rest of you, this is something I'm not going to stop struggling for justice, for freedom, for a better life, for peace for all of us. And I'm more energized than ever. So thank you so much.
Well, those are powerful words to end on, Rabab. Thank you. I think let's take that energy and keep join Rabab and everyone in walking this road of resistance, as they say, generation after generation until liberation. So thank you everyone for joining us today. And yeah, I think that's the end of the program. So